Democrats in Colorado are already preparing for President Trump to send the military into the streets here like he's doing in California, though it's not clear what they can do about it.
Eric will be the first one behind bars when we melt down the machines.
That Eric is from Colorado, and he's suing My Pillow guy Mike Lindell for his election rigging claims. Today, Lindell took the stand at his trial, crying, defiant, and he may have done himself in. Denver celebrates wins in the fight against unsheltered homelessness. Question is whether the city can keep up the progress, given its budget problems. And after we investigated a mega hospital chain suing its own patients in Colorado, researchers come into the state to check out our work and see if it's really going down like that. Tonight on Next. President Donald Trump is sending the Marines into Los Angeles to put down violent protests against his mass roundups of immigrants. And Democrats in Colorado are preparing for it to happen here. The president is taking control of some of California's National Guard forces. Doing that without consulting state leaders is a rare move. So every Democratic governor in America, including Colorado's Jared Polis, has signed a letter calling Trump's move intimidation and an alarming abuse of power. The Democrats who control Colorado's legislature have passed sweeping laws that limit how much information and cooperation ICE can get from local law enforcement here. Tucked into their latest bill was a provision trying to prevent National Guard forces from being used against Colorado's wishes. It prohibits other states from sending their National Guard here unless requested by the governor or acting on federal orders. State legislators acknowledge there is not much they can do to interfere if the president demands it.
Governor Polis actually asked us to put in a section to Senate Bill 276 to prevent other states' National Guards from being deployed here to Colorado. We have done everything that we can do, but what we have seen is that Donald Trump is willing to overrule local governments and state governments in order to exercise his will.
Last month, the New York Times reported the Trump administration is considering calling up 200,000 National Guard members to help with immigration enforcement. At the time, Governor Polis said he had deep reservations about that. So there's a protest right now against President Trump's immigration policies. This is in Aurora. These folks plan to end their march outside the ICE facility in Aurora, where there are people waiting for deportation proceedings. If My Pillow guy Mike Lindell loses his election rigging defamation trial in Denver, this will be the day that did it. And the witness who sealed his fate? Himself. The team suing Lindell called him as their own witness, and when they got him on the witness stand, they just let him talk and talk and talk.
We have all the election fraud with these Dominion machines. We have 100% proof.
The My Pillow guy's talk has led the world's most powerful man to believe he's a victim of election rigging.
This election was rigged, and the Supreme Court and other courts didn't want to do anything about it.
Lindell has made clear he too sees himself as a victim, crying on the stand today as he talked about how his company collapsed after he started his election rigging claims. His attorneys say it doesn't matter if all that was the truth, it's just good enough that Mike Lindell believed that Denver-based Dominion Voting Systems and a former executive there flipped the 2020 election. I wasn't reckless, Lindell testified. I've probably done more due diligence than anyone in human history. But not one of the election security or cyber experts consulted by Lindell is coming to testify at this trial that Lindell has evidence to back up his claims. In fact, testimony has shown that some of Lindell's own experts and ideological allies warned him that his so-called evidence was nonsense. He was asked on the stand whether his accusations are dangerous if he's wrong. But I'm not wrong, Lindell said. In fact, Lindell testified that when he was warned that his so-called experts and evidence were shoddy, he only became more convinced, thinking the pushback was part of a grand cover-up. Opposing attorneys let Lindell rant at length from the witness stand, including the moment when he once again accused a former Dominion exec of a high crime. He did it right there in the courtroom. "You're covering up the greatest crime this world has ever seen," Lindell hollered at his opponents. Then, turning to the jury and saying, as he has for years, "Our politicians are selected for us." The opposing attorneys asked Lindell, practically begged him today, to offer up any other evidence he had that Dominion's Eric Coomer had participated in the greatest crime in history. Lindell said the proof was that Coomer had sued him for defamation. A piece of circular logic that might just qualify as among the greatest in history. Denver's annual count of people living on the streets in this city shows those numbers have dropped 45% in 2 years. It's not magic, it's money. Mayor Mike Johnston has spent a ton of it moving people into transitional housing. Our Janelle Finch looks at the city's plan to keep that momentum up and deal with a budget deficit.
The journey of homelessness isn't defined. It can be more private or more visible. Denver doesn't want to see anyone experiencing homelessness at all.
This will continue to be a top priority for us.
Over the last 2 years, the city says it's been getting closer to making that a reality. Mayor Mike Johnston says the total number of people living on the streets is down 45% from 2023, from more than 1,400 to just under 800.
We don't have large encampments anymore in Denver. We don't have the 50, 100, 200 tent encampments we had 2 years ago.
He says federal ARPA funds paid for a lot of the infrastructure resources like hotels and tiny homes. But moving forward, the city is preparing to be more self-sufficient.
And all our dollars going forward are now really just general fund dollars, or we have a special dedicated tax in Denver that supports this. So that's really where most of our revenue comes from now.
Finding funding within may be easier said than done, especially for a city facing a $250 million budget deficit.
All of our departments will have to tighten the belt, but we're not going to undo the key programs we've invested in that have been so successful.
Johnston says about 7,000 people have moved indoors between the city's family shelters and all-in mile-high sites since summer 2023. He says about 5,000 people have transitioned to permanent housing, but says the future needs to continue to prioritize affordable options.
How do we make sure we can bring on 3 or 4 or 5,000 units of affordable housing every year?
While homelessness may look different, Johnston wants the end result to be the same.
We're always looking for ways to do this effectively and efficiently, and we'll just keep working harder and smarter to do that.
During the Biden administration, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness partnered with the city of Denver to receive federal assistance in addressing the crisis. Trump undid that council with an executive order earlier this year. The former executive director says other cities will likely be in a similar situation to Denver, relying on more local resources to bring an end to homelessness.
When we talk about the impact of federal dollars or the lack thereof on Denver, they're waiting to see what Republicans in Congress do with the budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Mayor Johnston did say that the city is preparing for potential cuts to Medicaid, knowing that hundreds of thousands of Coloradans do rely on that. So they are trying to get ahead of that by having conversations with the governor, having conversations with Denver Health in case that does put more pressure on homelessness here in Denver. All
right, Janelle Finch, great to have you on next. Thank you. Other cities and counties released the results of their own annual homeless counts today. And while homelessness region-wide is slightly up, advocates do point to a couple of wins. The Metro Denver Homelessness Initiative says the number of people who were homeless on the night of the count in January ticked up by much less than year-over-year increases in recent years. That group also says this is the first winter season without a known death from exposure for anybody sleeping outdoors. For that, they credit an increase in cold weather shelters in Denver and Jefferson County. One of Denver's largest homeless shelter operators, the Salvation Army, is up for a multi-million-dollar contract extension, despite recent controversies over security at its sites. City Council is being asked to approve a $4.5 million contract extension for the Salvation Army to keep running the Crossroads Men's Shelter at 29th Street. It's one of the most frequently used congregate shelters in the city, and the Salvation Army has managed it for about a decade. The contract extension comes shortly after the Salvation Army's management of its all-in Mile High hotel shelters has come under scrutiny, especially that shelter at the former Doubletree Hotel on Quebec. Last year, an employee was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting a resident. In 2023, 2 people were shot and killed at that shelter. Those incidents have led some advocates for the homeless and members of City Council to say that Salvation Army's contract should be canceled. The city is requiring nonprofits to submit safety plans and to do more extensive staff training.
There's been numerous complaints regarding operations of some of their other programs, primarily the hotels and also the Connection Center. That's real, and we are working on that.
2 of the strongest critics on City Council voted to postpone debate about the contract. If Council doesn't vote to approve the extension for the Crossroads shelter, city housing leaders say they'd have to come up with some kind of emergency staffing solution until they bring in a new provider. Regardless of what you hear on the news, the world is full of good people. Colorado is full of good people, and I'm talking to them. Your latest Word of Thanks microgiving campaign has raised more than $80,000 to fight hunger in our community. That counts up all your donations from this last week, a generous donors match, and then the split of the monthly gifts to our Word of Thanks fund. $80,000. That's going to help the nonprofit Help and Hope Center feed our neighbors in Douglas and Albert County when they fall on hard times. Your generosity over the last 5 years has done $15 million worth of good across our state, and we'll do it again Wednesday. Send me ideas of nonprofits making an impact in your community. Email next@9news.com or text next at 303-871-1491.
It was so hidden that some of the patients didn't even know when they were sued for debt that it was medical debt.
Major healthcare networks trick to conceal its lawsuits against hundreds of its own patients. And the top Republican in the Colorado Senate is headed for the exit. That's next. One of the highest-ranking Republicans at the state capitol is leaving the place for a new job. Senate Minority Leader Paul Lundeen from Monument announced his resignation today. Lundeen, who has the best voice in the legislature, deep and booming, has served in the state Senate since 2019. Before that, 3 years in the state House. He told our partners at Colorado Politics he's leaving to lead the American Excellence Foundation. That's a conservative nonprofit that pairs investors with conservative policy projects. Senate Republicans, who are in a tiny minority, will pick a new leader later this week. Then a small group of party insiders called a vacancy committee will pick the replacement to fill Lundeen's seat in the Senate, which is not up for election until next November.
I hope you're having a great Monday. Nice to have a break from the heavy thunderstorms and the heavy rain. I know we've got a bit of haze out there, and you're probably wondering where are the beautiful blue skies that we're so accustomed to. This is wildfire smoke coming in on northerly winds from Canada. No air quality alerts posted thus far. 80 in Denver today. That's average for the date. How about 90s out across the western slope this afternoon? Right now, beautiful conditions, but we are tracking a few thunder showers over the southern mountains and foothills, and a couple of them as they've drifted south into New Mexico. Well, we've got a severe thunderstorm watch and a couple of warnings around Santa Fe and Albuquerque for hail-producing thunderstorms. The severe threat stays south of us tonight. The temperature trend really nice over the next few hours. Walk the dog, walk the kids to the park, have dinner on the patio. Beautiful, almost an early summer evening. Summer doesn't arrive officially, though, for 2 more weeks. So again, we have a quiet night tonight, a mostly sunny day tomorrow. There'll be a couple of foothill storms. Denver stays dry, though. We'll go partly sunny with temperatures in the upper 80s for Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. I did put in a 20 to 30% chance of a little rain from any of those storms that might drift in on Thursday. But the trend is for a quiet week of weather leading us into Father's Day weekend with the first 90-degree temperature of the day Saturday, warmer conditions on Sunday, and the dry weather trend looks like it could continue into early next week.
If you get hit with a lawsuit and you don't recognize the name, maybe it's your hospital. We investigate how a legal loophole allowed a medical provider to sue hundreds of its patients in secret. And it's no secret you can watch Next streaming each night at 6 p.m. on 9 News Plus. And Next is a podcast wherever you get those. A group of researchers took a look at some of our reporting recently on UC Health's habit of suing thousands of its own patients every year. They were wondering if they could replicate the findings of our 9 News Investigates team. In the end, those researchers ended up concluding, well, what our Chris Vanderveen had already realized.
For years, the largest provider of healthcare in the state was also its most litigious, suing patients by the hundreds every quarter until one quarter in early 2020, the lawsuits appeared to disappear. That is, until we found them hiding by the thousands within the state's court system.
I got sick. My blood pressure went up because I got scared.
Instead of suing patients like Lorena under their own name, UC Health began suing patients under the names of one of 2 third-party debt collectors, a practice that made their lawsuits nearly impossible to track.
Why did we come to Colorado and do a deep dive on UC Health? Well, it was really because you broke the story.
Cynthia Fisher heads Patient Rights Advocate, or PRA, a nonprofit fighting for more transparency in healthcare pricing. Following 9 News Investigates reporting last year, PRA joined with researchers at Stanford and George Washington Law to see if they could verify what our investigation found. Spoiler alert, they did.
I mean, it was so hidden that some of the patients didn't even know when they were sued for debt that it was medical debt.
By using third-party debt collectors as the signed plaintiffs on their lawsuits, UC Health, says the report, attempted to conceal this, that it remains the state's largest initiator of debt collection lawsuits against former patients.
We found that they were an outlier and that they were extremely aggressive in their practices.
Often, the lawsuits resulted in requests for wage garnishments. More than a third of suits brought by one debt collector resulted in legal requests to take home a percentage of the defendant's pay.
Hospitals do a lot of wonderful things, and a lot of really heroic people work there, but they also are causing a lot of harm, and they simply need to fix that.
George Washington Law professor Barack Richmond helped author the study. He says the report tells him UC Health didn't just conceal their lawsuits. They actively confused patients along the way.
We found, and your reporting, your terrific reporting has found, that patients just don't understand the bill. And that's because nobody understands the bill. The bills are totally ununderstandable.
In a statement, UC Health called the study misleading and based on data that is up to 6 years old, adding 99.93% of all patient accounts are resolved without any issues. It's similar to what UC Health told us last year when we first exposed the practice.
99.9% of our patients get through the process without any involvement from a collections agency or a court.
Also last year, and following our reporting, the state legislature passed a law effectively putting an end to the hospital's practice of suing under someone else's name. From now on, if UC Health or any other hospital wants to sue a patient for unpaid debt, it must put its name here. Chris Vanderveen, 9 News.
Spokesperson for UC Health also told us the nonprofit hospital system has improved its processes to minimize some of the billing errors we've identified in our reporting. Important to note here, while some other hospital systems in Colorado do sue patients for unpaid bills, the largest for-profit system in the state does not. Marilyn has your feedback. We'll have it for you next. Thank you. The most Colorado thing we saw today is an ingenious way to repurpose your skis during the off-season. Christy in Castle Rock put the family's skis out ahead of a hailstorm last Friday. Last line of defense for her garden. She says it worked. You can see why it would. All the plants made it through the storm. That is ingenious. She actually says that her husband has been holding on to some old skis for a project he's going to do someday. Listen, sir, if you're watching, don't let Christy pressure you. You save whatever you need to for that project someday. It'll come in clutch. If you see something that looks like Colorado to you, send it to us. Jan on Blue Sky, which is like Twitter but for liberals, says Mike Lindell really should have an insanity defense. I don't know if you're being serious or insulting the man, but this is a civil defamation trial, so they're going to determine whether or not he is responsible for defamation, and then if he is, there will be damages after that. There's no such thing as an insanity defense. It was interesting today that it was the opposing side that really wanted the jury to peek inside that man's mind. They let him talk and talk and talk, thinking it helped their case more than his. Text, do you get your clothes from the little boys rack? I do not. This is a women's medium.